Thank you very much. It's great to be in a church with a lot of musical talent, isn't it? As I said, it's really great to be back here, to see your faces. Actually, it's funny, I was chatting to one of the teachers, and they were commenting how when parents came along without masks on, they were struggling to recognise who the parents were, looking through the glass. Oh, who's that? Because they're so used to looking at people with masks on. So, yeah. Yes, we live in a very unsure world, as we're currently seeing. We're all concerned about Ukraine, and I suppose, Ukraine is the latest. Myanmar, of course, they're under terrible situations there. We can just continue going around the world, and there's lots of miserable places to live where people are living in terror, and definitely not the blessings we have in Australia. Our main concern about Ukraine is whether petrol is going to be $2.50 a litre. That seems to be the level of our issue. We're facing a new year, and I thought this for lots of us is the start of a new year, the start of a new church year, start of we all already seem to be running along. I wonder how many made New Year's resolutions. Any New Year's resolutions? The start of a year is a time when you can sort of go, I hope this year is going to be better than next. Or looking at last year, this is what I'd like to improve on this year. That's really, actually the New Year's resolution goes back to Babylon about 4,000 years. But of course, back then it was promises they would make to the gods in hope that they would earn good favour in the coming year. So you'd make these outrageous promises to the gods and hope that the gods say, oh, wow, if he thinks that way, yeah, maybe I'll often resolve to get out of debt. The concept for the pagan was that religion and life was based around luck. Their gods, the pagan gods, the Greek gods, they were sort of beings in the sky that sort of controlled what went on, but they weren't particularly interested in human beings. We were just like sort of sheep in a paddock, kangaroos, just sort of, oh yeah, look at that kangaroo over there, is, doing this or that, or stupid old kangaroo or stupid old sheep or whatever. There was no real relationship with humans. Just every now and then, the gods would see you jump over a fence or do something amazing, so they go, oh, wow, that was pretty impressive. I think I'll make that kangaroo or that sheep happy. I'll feed it, or I'll make its coat go well. Or maybe they might see something that, often the idea was that there was like a little village up there. And, maybe Thor had just got upset with Diana of the Ephesians because she had upset him or rebuffed him when he'd asked her out for a date. And so he'd be going along and he'd see someone who was worshipping Diana of the Ephesians, and he'd go, oh, I'll get even with it. So boom, lightning would strike. So this was this vagaries, just luck, chance, maybe you might somehow fool a god or please a god. And so that was what the New Year's resolution was. Of course, the Judeo-Christian religion and God was totally different. It was about a relationship that was built on genuine love and trust. And when you sort of went, hey, just a minute, how can you have a relationship with someone you don't see, something that's in the sky, the supernatural? Then what the Judeo-Christian religion God would say is, well, look back and see what I've done for your ancestors. Look back and see what I've done for you. And because of what I've done in the past, you can know what will happen with our relationship into the future. And so this is where, as we look in the Bible, that all that I am, praise the Lord, may I never forget the good things He does for me. That is critical to the Judeo-Christian faith. It's critical to the understanding of God. It's critical to your happiness and the point of existence as far as your Christianity is concerned. This is why, it makes the point, sums up, we have nothing to fear for the future except we forget the way the Lord has led us in the past. And I'd like to reflect on that a little bit because, I don't know about you, but sometimes I'm very good at saying, oh, wow, that was great, God. Thank you for sorting that out. And then next time I run into a problem, it's like, oh, why is this happening to me? Where's God? Why doesn't God do anything? What's happened? I've forgotten, haven't I? I've forgotten. And let's have a look at Joshua 4 and verses 1 to 7. So here today I'd like to have a look at this concept of milestones and the importance. Joshua 4 and verses 1 to 7. When all the people had crossed Jordan, God said to Joshua, choose 12 men, one from each tribe. Tell them, take 12 stones from the very place where the priests are standing in the middle of the Jordan. So they're crossing over the Jordan. And how are they crossing over the Jordan? By walking down through the middle of it. Not on a bridge, not swimming across. So take 12 stones from the middle, right down the bottom of the river that's now dry, and pile them up on a place where you camp tonight. So that's what they did. And he said, do this. And then verse 6, we will use these stones as a memorial. In the future, your children will ask you, what do these stones mean? Then you'll tell them, they remind us that the Jordan River stopped flowing when the Ark of the Lord's covenant went across. These stones will stand as a memorial among the children of Israel forever. Okay, so when the children of Israel came into the promised land, the first religious act that they did was to establish a memorial. To establish a memorial to remember and remind themselves of what God did. Deuteronomy 4 and verse 9. You must be very careful not to forget the things you have seen God do for you. That's a challenge because we seem to be so quick to forget, so absorbed, so overtaken by the present problem. And sometimes so overtaken by what a party we're having now. We don't need God around, do we? We're doing fine, thanks very much. Yeah. I think this concept of memorial stones or remembering God's blessings. They're like family jewels, aren't they? You know, each family has grandma's wedding ring, or, you know, auntie's or mum's pearl, you know, whatever it is. We've got a family jewel. When we went out to Lightning Ridge as a minister, that was where my daughter was born, my first child. And we got out there, and Lightning Ridge is where they find all these black opals, beautiful opal. I think probably one of the most beautiful gems there are, when you get the fire in like a stones on fire and the nice black backing. That's what a black opal is. It has its own backing. And as it happened, when we got out there, I must admit, we were living on the Central Coast. I was the youth pastor on the Central Coast. And I went up to the conference office. You know, they invited me up there, and they said, well, we've got a real good challenge for a young pastor. We're sending you to Lightning Ridge. And I said, where's that? And he had a map of New South Wales up on the wall, and he went, the coast, and I went, whoa, it's about as far from the coast as you can possibly get in New South Wales, almost to the Queensland border, almost getting towards South Australia. And my wife was about 3 months pregnant at the time, so you can imagine how excited she was about the idea of going out. I mean, there was at Moree, there was a hospital about an hour and a half away that had about half a dozen beds. And if you wanted to go to any decent hospital, it was like about 3 hours or more away, as long as it hadn't rained, and the black soil country where when it rains, the mud builds up on the tyres, and so you can't go anywhere. But so yeah, it was missionary work out there. It was very, very, very different. But I don't know, there was a little sort of, when we got out there, these opals are obviously hard to find, otherwise they wouldn't be expensive. But at that time, a lot of the mining had been just pick and shovel. Now it's very sophisticated machinery. And where they'd pick and shovel, they just dumped dirt on the surface, and after any rain, you could go out and the rain would wash away a little bit more clay, and you would look, and the sun would come out, and you'd look for a speck. You'd look for a little bright speck, and you'd pick it up, and so much of it was broken or smashed, or little bits of potch, they call it. As it was, my wife was, for about half an hour, actually in the churchyard where we lived. She says, oh, what's this? Is this what they're talking about? Picked it up, and sure enough, it was exactly what we're talking about, and we took it to a Adventist opal cutter, and yes, we have a nice little black opal. It's not worth a fortune, but it's a lovely little reminder of the blessings that we had out there, even though it seemed really tough. So a family jewel, and every time we get it out, we're reminded of how God was with us in that fairly tough situation. Inheritance for you to pass on to your children, to share with friends. Milestones. So I thought, what is the point of milestones or memorials? And as we look here, I think the first thing is they help us be positive, happy people. Have you noticed the reality? Bad things ask loudly to be remembered. Bad things ask loudly to be remembered. And you know, in our life, often it's easy to remember bad things. And it takes less energy to remember bad things, remember, and it just seems to be our human nature, isn't it? They tried, was it America? Everything's tried in America. They tried having good news. The news was only good news. Didn't last long because people didn't want to hear it. Well, didn't want to hear it. They didn't bother hearing it because they wanted to hear what the real news was, and most real news is what? That's it. Bad news. And that seems to be our society. Oh, how was your holidays? Oh, good, but man, we were up at a dam and there was a lady who was run over and got a leg badly cut with a speedboat. Or, oh yeah, man, we had the terrible downpour at our camp, half got washed away. Had to pack up and, why don't we have, I was out surfing and there was the dolphins came and swam near us. I can remember the beautiful sunrise or the beautiful sunset. Strange, isn't it, how we so often in our attitudes in life remember the bad. And so I think here the importance of milestones, remembering God's blessings, is that if we continue to do that, we can be happy and positive people. Some people, their memories are only hooks to hang grudges on. Only hooks to hang grudges on. We all have a tough life. We live in a world of sin. No one just has a cruise. There's lots of hooks we can hang grudges on. But it's not nice to be around people that just seem to be full of grudges. They often don't like their own company, let alone others. So memory stones can help us be positive, remembering God's blessings. I think the next point is they can help us, make us feel secure and loved. Notice Joshua 3 and verse 23. It's a reminder for a new generation. For the Lord your God dried up the Jordan before you until you crossed over. The Lord your God did to the Jordan what he had done to the Red Sea when he dried it up before us until we crossed over it. So here, this memorial was actually not only a memorial of crossing the Jordan, but God did that as a memory event of what he had done back when they came out of Egypt for the grandparents. Amazing, that idea of what it would be like, the artist's struggle but something happened quite incredible. I tried to find it. I love the picture of a little boy picking up a stone and throwing it into the vertical bit of water. Just sort of always got my imagination of what would it really been like? How did it actually work? But it was very, very dramatic. Very dramatic. And so God was saying, remember. When your children ask, remember. Because this, in verse 10, this is how you will know that the living God is among you, and he will certainly drive out before you the Canaanites, Hittites, Hivitites, Jebusites, started Amorites and Jebusites. So what's happening here? We're having the people go into the land and they're scared. There's all these very warlike people that they've been told they've got to drive out and take it. This is the land God's giving you. It wasn't God sort of said, well, here's the keys to the house. the garden and the landscaping's been done. You just move in, bring your furniture in. No, here's the keys to the house. You've got to drive out all these warring, big, successful armies. So what did he do? This is how you will know the living God is among you. He performed a miracle for them to start off. They marched across on dry land. Probably had a pretty big impact on their enemies too, I would guess. I'm pretty sure there was some Amorites and Canaanites and Gideonites and Jebusites, spies, sitting up on the hills watching and going, well, how the heck are they going to get across that river? And then when they saw, they went, whoa. And that was part of it. It's important to remember. I know one of the jewels of our family that remember, it's actually now when we go up towards past Grafton, Kempsey area, my grandmother lived at Lennox Head, which is just near Ballina. So we'd be going that way on a regular basis. And I can remember I was probably about 8 or 9, and we had this very primitive sort of caravan thing that we would camp in. And we had an old, well, I don't know how old the Falcon was. It wasn't new, but it's definitely an old Falcon now. And we were going along, and Dad decided to pull over we'd pull over for a drink and a pit stop, etc. And there was an area that was like just to pull off beside the road, a bit of a gravelly pit thing, bit of mud, bit of water, but nothing big deal. He just pulled in, and we stopped, had a drink, had a bite to eat and whatever, and then we hopped in the car, and he started the car up and tried to go, and the wheels just spun. And we got out and we pushed, and then Mum drove and Dad pushed, and we all tried to push, and nothing. He tried throwing a bit of stuff in front of the wheels, and we were stuck. And when we were just about to decide, well, let's get some other stuff, and it started pouring rain, so we all piled in the car, and it absolutely teemed down rain. And of course, Dad went, if we were stuck before it poured raining, what's going to be like after it's teemed down raining? And it absolutely teemed, and it blew, and it was a real storm came across. Anyway, we waited for the rain to stop, and Dad waited a little bit longer. And then he hopped out, and he looked, and he thought, I'll just try one more, just maybe something might have changed. So I got in the car, turned it on, revved it up a little bit, drove straight out. And we're like, what? 15 minutes down the road, we came to like a cyclone had gone through. In fact, for many years, there was actually, if you'd driven up that Grafton way, there was a caravan up in a tree that had been blown up, smashed up, tangled in the tree. And I don't know why, whether it was the local council, everyone was amused or whatever, but it stayed there for many years. I suppose it was no good to anyone getting it down out of the tree, and you couldn't sleep in it. It was smashed caravan up in the tree. And I remember that we pulled into a service station at Grafton, and we had to get remember the old pump petrol station, when the power would go out, they'd get there and they'd pump away on the Bowser. But what we realised is that if we hadn't got stuck, we would have been right in the middle of that. And there were cars said, I don't remember anyone being killed, but it was a real mess. And we looked back and just realised that God had bogged us there. just so that we would miss out on that. And that's one of the family jewels, the milestones that we will often remember in our family. I think it's important, the message here in the Bible and in Joshua is we need to put special effort into remembering these blessings. You know, I now have a prayer journal where I write down what I call my rainbows. You've heard me call them rainbows in other sermons, but just little things, sometimes big things that God has done in our lives to show that He's there. Things that are just, beyond luck, for want of a better term. And they can help us feel secure and loved. Notice here the Psalms of Ascent. When the Lord restored the fortunes of Zion, we were like those who dreamed. Our mouths were filled with laughter, our tongues with songs of joy. Then it was said among the nations, the Lord has done great things for them. The Lord has done great things for us, and we are filled with joy. When we remember what God has done for us, it fills us with joy, can make us positive, happy people, and feel secured and loved. Also, they can be a great witnessing tool. Sharing your testimony. Sometimes we get involved, we think witnessing is, all right, let me show you the 10 texts on the state of the dead, why your mother is down there rotting away with worms rather than up in heaven with Jesus at the moment. And then we wonder why we don't convince them, Yes, it's important to share. Mark 5 and verse 18 to 20. Go home and tell your friends how much the Lord has done for you. And these little rainbows, these family jewels can be things that we can share. When you share, people can either go, they're mad, well, fair enough. When you try and talk about theology and argue on a theory, you get into an argument, don't you? So often. I remember when my son, when Jason was 21, he was doing landscape gardening, labouring. And I suppose landscape gardeners, I don't want to stereotype people, but I worked as a brickies labourer to put myself through college, and those that do that as a living are not necessarily the intellectual part of society. Tough, hard living, and my son at that time went down to Tasmania for a surf trip with his mates. And unfortunately, they're right down the bottom of the east coast of Tasmania. And unfortunately, when they were leaving, someone forgot to tie the boards properly onto the roof. And it wasn't until they got to the next shop or wherever, about an hour or two up the road, they suddenly realised the surfboards weren't on the roof with them. And that wasn't a great experience. So they turned around, drove back, looking everywhere, beside the road, where they'd been, how come, didn't find them. And they were Christian kids, and they had prayed that they'd be able to find them and whatever, and they couldn't. That sort of interrupted their surfing trip, as you can imagine, and they decided to head up into the west coast of Tasmania, right up in the real rugged area. And some of them did a bit of fishing, and they went looking for a good fishing spot. They had no luck with fishing, and they were just leaving this very rugged area, and they thought, we'll see what's down this other track. There was another little campsite down there, camping area. They went down, and there in the camping area, Have a guess what they saw? Surfboards. Their surfboards. And they then went up to the person who the surfers there and said, "Hey, where'd you find those?" Or, "They're our boys." They said, "Oh yeah, well, we found them down the east coast." And they were, they hadn't pinched them. They were just happy to, okay, they're yours, fair enough. And my son and his mates just couldn't. I mean, miles and miles. The opposite side of Tasmania just happened, and they just thought afterwards, is this luck? Or was this, just the fishing was bad, they got bored, they decided to go down, try this camp, and there were the boards. They didn't believe so. They believed that God was there and had answered their prayer in a special way. And when Jason got back to his workmates, back in Sydney, the landscape gardeners, and I don't think any of them were Christians. They're a pretty tough crowd, and he shared it, and he said, "What do you think of that?" And another one said, Hey, Jason, have you noticed anything different?" And Jason looked about the clothes and the hair and the tattoos and the rings. And no. The guy says, George says, "No smokes." Jason said, "Oh, great. How long you been?" "Oh, about 3 weeks since you prayed for me, remember?" And another one said, "Hey, how about praying for me that I'll win lotto?" And I can remember he started a Bible study with one of those guys. And Jason, I can remember what he said. "Dad, I thought they'd laugh at me, but they listened." Tough crowd. When you share how much the Lord has done for you, people listen. When you share your blessings, people think they often want to know about more. Share the everyday way God makes a difference in your life. It can be a very positive witnessing tool. The milestones, remembering God's blessings, can be the best heritage you can give your children. Better than family jewels and opals or pearls or whatever it is. Better than a big bank deposit. Joshua 4 and verse 21 to 24, he said to Israel, "In the future, when your descendants ask their parents, 'What do these stones mean?' tell them, 'Israel crossed the Jordan on dry ground. For the Lord your God dried up the Jordan before you until you had crossed over. The Lord your God did to Jordan what he had done at the Red Sea when he dried it up. He did this so that all the people of the earth might know that the hand of God is powerful, and so that you might always love and respect the Lord your God." Family jewels, milestones are very important. One that comes from my great-grandparents, one of my great-aunties was a Methodist. And this is back in the horse and buggy days. And they lived out on a farm. They weren't particularly rich, had a bit of a tough farm. And she had to go into town to get the essentials, back in those days was flour and salt and a bit of those other things to supplement what they could grow and on the farm. But she didn't have much money. But she had her tithe money, Methodist tithe also. And she used to take her money in to the church when she went into town. That's how she paid her tithe. And she had enough tithe money to buy a good big bag of flour. and she wanted, 10-pound bag of flour that would get them through and the work site. And it was a real tussle. There's rationale of, this will help us, keep the workmen going so that they can earn more money so we can pay tithe. All those sorts of things. Finally, she decided that she would pay the tithe and then went to the shop and got what she could. And it wasn't terribly much flour, and she was in the horse and buggy heading back out of town, and one of the carts ahead was stopped, and she stopped, and a guy, was like the truck of the time. There's a car, big cart, and he says, hey ma'am, could you use some flour? Why is that? He says, well, I've just had a 20 bag fall off the back of my cart. When I hit a bump and I can't use it. So someone may as well use it. Do you need one? It's a family jewel that's been passed down from generations in our family from different religions. She was a Methodist, and I know we lived at Kellyville in Sydney, and there was the main drive going down to the old Kellyville Church where we lived behind had a whole lot of Norfolk pine trees, big pine trees. You'd put your arms about like that around them, and I don't know, 20, 30 metres high, some of them. And we would drive down this road, and along the track, it was also going to the golf course. They had speed humps, and I suppose a speed hump to some males is a challenge, not a slow down device. And I suppose I fitted into that category very often. And you can, when you got a sort of a smoothie gutter on one side, if you go and over, you can just get one wheel past, no hump, and so you only hit on one side, and then you do it the other side so that you don't wreck your suspension too much because you're going over it too fast. And that was typical. And I was coming down this road with the kids in the car in my old Sigma, and something caused me to be different. I just sort of felt this calmness, and I slowed right down, went over the speed hump slow, and I can remember in my brain thinking, what's going on? What have you gone slow over the speed hump for? And just as that was in my mind, there was my daughter screamed. I whacked on the brakes as a big tree just came right down the road. And the tip of the branches just hit the front of the bonnet. And we just shook because that trunk that was about that wide just came right down the road where we would have been if I had not slowed. When you tear over a speed hump, you save 1 second or 2 seconds, don't you? Something silly. But that's where we would have been. And for our family, that's one of the family jewels where the Lord saved the 4 of us from almost certain death. The day an angel slowed Dad down, the kids like to call it. It's important because it makes you, it's the best inheritance you can pass on to your kids. Finally, it gives you light in the dark times. My parents, Dad got a brain tumour, and we prayed, and instead of taking 6 months to die, he was around for another 3.5 years, but there was one or two things, quite amazing little rainbows that happened in their lives at that time, where God showed them I may have mentioned it before, but what happened is they decided they wanted to move up to a retirement village. They weren't sure. They went up and put a deposit down on the retirement village. And then they came back and they prayed, say, God, if you want us to move, if it's the best thing to move, then we'll sell the house. And they got 3 real estate agents in, and they chose the middle one. And they said, okay, if we get this price, then we know we need to move. And it was back in the times when there was quite a recession, and they had, I think, about 3 months before their deposit would go up on the retirement village place. So after 3 months, almost 3 months, 3 months minus 1 week, no one had come to look at the house. So my mum, being my mum, she rang up the real estate, the people up in where the aged care place was, and said, no one's come to look at our house. We won't be moving in. We're just letting you know before the time where we'll lose our deposit. Please refund us our deposit. The next day, someone came and looked at the house, and they put an offer in that was below the middle thing. It was about 4 or 5, I've forgotten the exact amount, 4,000 or 5,000 below. And they said, the real estate agent, look, we've prayed about this, we're not sure, but we've prayed about it and we need the exact amount. And real estate agent came back to them an hour later and he said, you will get the amount that you've asked for, not because the people have put up the money, increased it, but because I've dropped my fee by that amount. Now, I've never heard, have you ever heard of a real estate agent dropping a fee so that a house can sell? And just in case Mum and Dad thought it was just luck, she rang up straight away the retirement village and said, hey, we'll take that house after all. We've just sold the house. Sorry about that. I shouldn't have rung up yesterday. My faith in God was a bit weak. And the guy said, your God must be with you, because right at this time there is someone down looking at that house, and would expect them to come back within the next 15 or 20 minutes and take it. So that was a real rainbow in Mum and Dad's experience. It just shared with them a reminder that God is there even through the rough times. Dad still died of the cancer, but he and Mum and us too, we had a real reminder that God is there even though we walk through the valley of the shadow of death. God will be with us. We have nothing to fear for the future except we forget how God has led us in the past. Memorial stones, family jewels, memories of God's blessings make us feel secure and loved, make us happy, positive people, powerful witnessing tool, the best inheritance you can give your children, and light for the dark times. Psalms 126 verse 3, the Lord has done great things for us. We're filled with joy, filled with laughter, and filled with joy. May you remember the great things God has done for you. Great things, helping a house sell is not really a big thing, but it's great because God was there, just showing that he was there because of the timing. Getting out of a bog So what? Not a big thing, but a big thing because it showed God was there. So we missed the hassle that it would have been involved in the storm. Big things because it shows that God is looking after you and He loves you. May you remember those times and may you hold on to them forever. Dear God, we are reminded once again how mighty you are. And we're reminded in the Bible of your mighty acts. We remember in our church history the way that you've guided and led. We reminded here at Rowville how this building was found and was affordable when no one thought that would be possible. But we also remember in our individual lives how you have intervened at times to give us moments of joy, intervene to give us a little bit more time with loved ones, whatever it is. We thank you for it. And we ask that you'll continue to help us hold on to those times, especially when we face tough times. Thank you that you are a God who loves and wants to be in a relationship with us and shows us that through your gifts of love for Christ's sake. Amen.